This is an urgent legislative update brought to you by the Indiana Township Association.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to pop on and greet you all and thank you for your participation in this important briefing.
It's good to see you, Debbie.
Thank you.
Almost to the end of our legislative session. We hope to come together one more time after today's meeting and talk about what happened in this year's General Assembly. But for today, obviously we fielded a lot of questions in the last week over, what's happened at the State House. And today's focus is really going to be on Senate Bill 270, where it's at, where it's going in the next week, and some things to think about. So we'll start here with House Bill 1315. It was referred to the Local Government Committee in the Senate. It never actually got a hearing, so it is pretty much, we're going to say, is dead, just because of timing. The time they'd have to have the Local Government Committee hearing, then have second reading, third reading, and back to the House. So House Bill 1315, as far as that form, is dead. If there's questions about it, there's really nothing. I mean, we've talked about it in several past meetings, but just where it's at with the timing, there will not be an opportunity for that bill to move on. A lot of things we want to talk about today is Senate Bill 270. Obviously, through last Friday's meeting, we talked to you guys about how the initial meeting in local government in the House, Chairman May had asked that the authors of 270, Senator Niemeyer, and then a couple of the House reps with Karen Engelman and House Rep Alana Schonkweiler to have a meeting to kind of work out if there was anything in the two township reform bills could be worked out. So there was a meeting last Thursday, and then there was amendments that were made over the weekend and brought to this week in local government on Tuesday morning at 8:30. There were some amendments added to Senate Bill 270. Some of them mimic what was in House Bill 1315. And I know a lot of our members got a lot of questions about that. Whether it was, the 8051, whether there was population things that came over, what that means for townships going forward. And we want to assure you guys that we still are very confident in the vehicle of Senate Bill 270, even with those additions. It got passed after that through local government. It was recommitted like both bills were in their respective chambers, and it went to Ways and Means on Wednesday, where there was amendment added to it for, I believe it was about a township assessor scenario where they had a vacancy. ITA was neutral on that position as far as did we support that or oppose it. It really had nothing to do with the part of townships that we were worried about. And I think I know they discussed it, but I think it has that amendment in there as well. But it does not go after every township assessor, if that makes sense. So it was a localized issue where they couldn't find somebody that had those qualifications in their township boundary, and they asked if they could have those powers transferred over to the county assessor. Nothing that we really should take a stance on. Just wanted to let you guys know that it was added into Senate Bill 270. So obviously I'm gonna go, before I go to that, talk about some of the things. Obviously there was articles in the Capitol Chronicle. They called it a compromise bill. We knew that there was a possibility, whether House Bill 1315 made it through the Senate or had some amendments in the Senate, and Senate Bill 270 made it through the House. Could it go, to conference committee and try to figure out how to merge these bills together? The thing that we want to protect is that we're looking at township efficiencies on an even playing field, from whether you're from your small to large. We didn't want to do anything that went strictly after population or that went strictly after geography as the triggers for dissolvement or merging. So we fought to make sure that that point system was there. They did clarify a couple points. I know in question 8, when it talked about the ballot, it took that and separated the trustee from the board. And then it also added in there that if you had those roles filled by the annual or the required meeting in January of that year, that you could actually you would not get a point for those two questions. So there is some, I know we had some conversations with some of our members about question 8, and they were addressed through the scorecard and updated to reflect that. So we obviously, Senate Bill 270 is not an enrolled act yet, but we're getting to the point where we want to prepare our members to think about this as a reality. Senate Bill 270 has been made it through the committee stages. Now it will go to House second readings on Monday at 11 a.m., where there could be amendments. We're not aware of any amendments right now. We're kind of looking at as the bill is right now, how does it affect us? But there's some things that obviously we want people to start thinking about through the process of this last week of the General Assembly. The goal for them is to be done on February 27th because of the early start this year with the redistricting talks. That next Friday is supposed to be the stop date for the General Assembly. So we think in the next 2 days of next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we should pretty much know what the final line is going to be. So today's all going to be about questions either about 270 or talking about 270. But obviously here's just a picture of with if and when the bill becomes enacted or effective and enacted and enrolled, then it has to obviously be signed by the governor. But some things that people are questioning or asking questions about, what if we decide to merge? One of the things that was brought up from 1315 was the voluntary mergers and how that affects you if you do that. One, we can't do any mergers officially in 2026 in an election year, but they did put on there before July 1st of 2027. If you would start to do those mergers, you may be exempt. I talked to Dan from FBT Gibbons about that, our lobbyist, to make sure we have clarification, but we do kind of agree from just the language that if you were to discuss amongst yourself, say you in a neighboring township want to merge, it may keep you from having to go through the point system type of merge system, if that makes sense. So it's going to be another method for local control. So if we have townships that have already had these conversations or have been having these conversations the last couple months, it may be a way to say, hey, I don't know what if they score, a couple of us for what that may look like, but me and my neighbor want to join together. And we've talked about it over the last several years because, one of us doesn't want to do it anymore. Or we don't think anybody's going to want to run. You will have that mechanism to do a voluntary merger. Then it's going to go through the system assigned by 270 after the points are assigned. Obviously there's the date for the safe harbor window for is what we're going to call it, voluntary merger. And then you have the DLGF timeline for when they're supposed to certify your points to you. And then obviously the petition and appeal window sometime in 2027, which will be through the DLGF. And then obviously after meeting with the county commissioners, the designation list of what your township should look, or what townships looks are in your county. And then obviously the finalizing of the mergers have to be done by January 1 of 2029. So they pushed that back a year. It originally was 2028, which was really aggressive, but we knew, just getting it in there, we would probably work it out to push it back a little bit. I think the DLGF suggested that as well because of the timing of all the mergers and the workload that it would cause them, that going to 2029 would make it easier for that department to do all this work on their end. One thing we are going to do, we do get a lot of questions on, how do I figure, what are the points? How do I figure out those points? This is kind of a work in progress, but what we're planning on doing in the next week or so is getting this ready to go for our member center. And it is a self-scoring tool for yourself. You would type in here your township, your name, and then you would just basically go through here and you would say, the first one says township assistance. Did your township provide assistance in 23 or 24? You would hit yes or no, then it would assign the point from there. And you're going to do this yourself rather than us trying to guess. We don't have a certified list. The DLGF will give us a certified list, but this would be a good tool for you to kind of have the peace of mind or the thought of like, what are the next steps? And then as you get to the bottom of it, if you're under 4, it would say you could be designated as a receiving town, township, and if you're over 4, it says you may be required to merge. And then I think it does have some next steps of what you would be expected to do or what you can expect to happen. We think this will be very useful for people that are unsure of what their future is. And we hope to get it in the member center. So it's not something we're going to have for every township, but our ITA members that are having those questions about where do I find the scorecard, ultimately you can find it in the bill. I get it. The bills are very confusing, very wordy, trying to decipher all that and what it means. This may be easier for you to understand the questions in a basic manner and apply it to your township. If you're not sure, most of the stuff, township assistance, we should be able to track that. Fire contract or fire protection, we should be able to do that. Annual finance report, we should know if we turn that in or not. Same thing with monthly uploads. There's going to be questions you may not sure. So just put, that is going to be a self score. It's not going to be your for sure score, because maybe you thought you uploaded all your monthly engagements and you actually didn't until the DLGF gets certified that whether you did or didn't. So use this as a tool just to kind of get your mind in the right space and say, I think we're going to be on that line of 3 to 4 points, and maybe we did it something in this point chart, but then you could kind of prepare what the next steps are. So here's the bottom half of that page. It just says test townships. Gave them 4 points. No, it's just a tool for self-education, and official points assignments will come from the DLGF, provided that's who's going to oversee this in Senate Bill 270. So this is just a tool. If you have questions about it, you're like, I'm not sure, you could reach out to us. We can point you in the direction of where to find that information. If it's things that are easily accessible. The monthly engagements, ITA is not going to be able to tell if your monthly engagements are, if you turn them all in for 23 and 24, but you may be able to reach out, or you can log into your own account and see if all your engagements were turned in on time. Again, here talking about the self-score tool, we want you to do this, obviously to see where you're at. But the things that people question once the two bills merge was, what does the 8051 mean? Does that mean municipal reorganization automatically? The scorecard is ultimately the starter of Senate Bill 270. The scorecard is what determines the path of any township. If you score 4 or more, then those other things come into factor, whether it's the 8051 or if you have to merge with the receiving township. That's why we want to try to get this self-score tool out there as we prepare for this law or for this bill to become a law. That way you guys are ahead of the game. And then as we go through the year after this General Assembly, we'll try to work on things that help us prepare getting through 26 into 27. And it's going to be kind of an ongoing thing that we're working with our members to prepare. Back to the 80-51% language, I got a lot of calls. That was one of the things in House Bill 1315 where it looked at if your boundaries of your township were 80% inside incorporated into a municipality, 51% of your population was in the municipality, you're going to be forced to reorganize. There was no efficiencies looked at it. It was just based off purely geography. And that got added into Senate Bill 270, but not in the way that it was in House Bill 1315. So this rule only applies if a township hits 4 points. So if you were a target or thought you were a target in House Bill 1315 and was worried about this part of the bill, go on and do the self-score. Don't jump to the conclusion that your township is dissolved because you've seen that 80-51%. Trust me, when I seen the amendment myself for my own township, I thought the same thing. You have to read it. It says designated township. What a designated township is in this bill is a township that scores 4 points or more. So that is the key factor. Designated township means a township that scores 4 points. And then, so if there is a township that is 4 points or more, and then also 80% of your boundary is incorporated, or your township is incorporated, and 51% of your population is in the municipality, then yes, this could hit. But you have to have those 4 points first. The only reason we were comfortable with this is because we don't think that it's going to capture as many, or if any, that House Bill 1315 did. because of the point system slash school. Again, I think a big thing that, I've talked to several townships just in the last few days that have asked, if we decide to merge on our own voluntarily, will this protect us? We are very confident we're going to get clarification, though, that if you do this before or start this process before July 1st of 2027, you will be excluded. So, in my own county and other counties, a lot of trustees have already talked over the past several years. Maybe those negotiations or those discussions have fell through the cracks, but it will be an option because it won't be the receiving trustee has to remain intact, and the receiving board, two townships could work out who becomes the new trustee, who are the board members. You guys could make this your own way, and rather than getting to that meeting with the commissioners and being saying, well, you're a 4-point scorer or you're a designated township, you need to go with this receiving township, which could be similar to something that you're already looking at, or it could be completely different where you're looking at merging with a larger township. But it still has to be contiguous on every level, whether it's voluntary merging or with, the scorecard method. So we are kind of calling this the safe harbor, so that those people that are saying, well, me and my neighbor have thought about this, or me and two of my neighbors have thought about this township wise of merging together, we are probably going to see a lot of this happen in the beginning of 2027. So if you are thinking of that, no, you can't do it this year. You can't do it in an election cycle, but you can still talk with the other trustees and the boards about the process and say, hey, these are kind of our two avenues. We can either roll the dice and maybe you land inside of a larger township, or we think it'd be a better fit because one, we're on the western side of the county or the eastern side of the county in the corner, and it would make sense for us to merge together just based off of our similar scales of townships. When I can't hear anything or any feedback, it makes me go very fast, so I apologize. So I know we got a lot of questions. A lot of times, most of our meetings is about the questions. So, Flory, I can't see the chat. So when you do get the question, if you want to put the name, that way we know who it's from and I can answer them directly.
Okay, I'm going to start at the bottom. Let's see. Can you give clarification about the point for management of fire and EMS? It seems that there's confusion even among legislators. If a fire department is almost completely funded by the township, would we receive a point because we don't manage it?
Dan, can you jump in on that by any chance? Because I know there's been some confusion. I know we talked about it for weeks with Senator Niemeyer, I think, saying if you wrote checks that you would be okay, but I didn't understand it as that. We always thought if you were a check writer, mostly contracts, you would get a point for this point. I don't know about.
I'm pulling it up here.
And I think we get that question probably every week about the fire, and it is a very confusing because it does say something about 75% of your operating expenses out of your fire fund or cumulative or your EMS fund, which I guess that's going to be an interpretation of the law, what that means. Because if I have a fire fund and I have $70,000 for a contract and I expend $70,000, I essentially the operating, that's where it's tricky. And I think that's an interpretation of the law that everybody's not able to understand that well. I do know that there's townships out there that have the station, the truck, and they write a contract to a volunteer corporation to basically use that facility in those vehicles, but they don't actually have their own volunteer fire department. So I know that's where a lot of the people get confused at is, does that qualify as managing a fire department versus, somebody that just writes a check to a, maybe an Abbott Township volunteer corporation or a municipality. To me, I would see that as not getting a point or getting a point for fire.
And Dan, if we want to buy you a few minutes while you're looking through, there are multiple questions about if a trustee missed a monthly upload, and there's 4 different questions. Do you want to talk about the appeal process?
Sure. So the way that the appeal process is written currently does not give DLGF the ability to subjectively make determinations on that particular item. So if you have and ultimately those numbers or those reports and whether they were filed or not will be reported to the DLGF by the State Board of Accounts. And so whatever they send over, if you have objective evidence on why that is incorrect, that is appealable, but subjective reasons will not be. 1 point, if a township government does not actively manage fire protection or emergency medical services within the township as of January 1st of 2025. Your township does not actively manage fire protection or emergency medical services if, does not, keep in mind, if the township government does not allocate funds for fire protection or emergency services. You don't do it at all, somebody else does it for you. The township government is not a provider unit in a fire protection territory. So being in a fire protection territory doesn't help, only if you are the provider unit. Or at least 75% of the non-capital and non-debt services expenses are expended from your township government's firefighting and emergency services fund or the firefighting fund and emergency services fund under that particular code site. Or if the fire protection territory fund, if you're a provider unit of fire protection territory, were payments to other governmental units, a volunteer fire department, or an independent fire company. So it all depends on whether do you have a fire department that's a part of your township? Are you a provider unit in a territory? Or do you spend a significant amount of your revenue on fire protection? Those will be the determining factors on whether or not it applies. And it's impossible for us sitting here today to figure that out. You'll need to make that determination on your own.
And I think that's what gets tricky is about that, because if it says you spend all that money out of your fire funding, that's going to have to be subjected to the people that score it at the DLGF to say, okay, they have a firefighting fund and they have $100,000 in it. They spend, maybe that's a pass, but maybe it's not. We don't know. But we also got to get away from the every point. People should expect to get points regardless. It's going to be very rarely. There'll be a few townships out there that score 0. There's going to be a lot more townships that have a point or two, and realizing what those points are not going to be always easy for us. Like monthly engagements, we have no way on our end to know if you turn your monthly engagements in on time. So when you're doing that self score, be honest. If you felt like there was a year in 23 where I didn't turn them in until 24 or past the deadlines that the State Board of Accounts sets out, then be honest. But if you're not sure, then don't. I don't know. We don't have a way to tell you that you're going to get a point for that or not, because we don't have access. Even through Gateway, the public does not have access to your monthly engagements. That is a strictly State Board of Accounts requirement, and they're really the only ones that have access to those stats.
So, Drew, that was my question, and Dan and Drew, thank you for answering that. Wasn't there an amendment that was just made that they brought up, something regarding that we need to submit fire information to DLGF now so that this can help give them a score, or know whether to give us a point or not? But what was that amendment?
And Flora, you might touch on it, but I knew they added some EMS and fire reporting requirements. I don't think it's for them to tabulate the point. I think it's for them. They don't have records of all the fire reporting.
Yeah,
I think that's why this question has been the hardest for legislators in LA's or LSA, because they don't have a trackable way to just pull fire protection service.
Yeah, there's a lot of frustration because a lot of departments are not turning in their run reports. And now that the federal government has moved to a new reporting system, they are requiring that the fire departments, the fire marshals, and now the trustees all engage in this so that we can get real data. So we're working on putting together information with the state fire marshal so that everyone can go through training and you can work with your fire chiefs and make certain that your runs are being included. At some point, it's going to become a point if you aren't doing it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think this really goes back to the voluntary merges. There's a question if ITA is going to offer training for units who want to voluntarily merge in October or next year. Is that something we might look at for our conference?
I mean, obviously with conference in the fall, this will be a big subject, kind of like the roads bill and CIP was. We really had to take time to kind of explain once the dust settles, hoping that there's no changes in the second reading, that we can discuss in a more, not official, but a more structured tone of this is what we know. This is what the bill reads. It's enrolled. These are our deadlines for 100% sure. So this is just us kind of preparing that that's highly a possibility. But by October of this year, we will definitely know the direction we're going for the next 3 years, and we'll try to have either breakouts at conference. I know, last year we had several communities that have asked about merging and how to do it. I've talked to a couple, at least financial advisors, and I know Flory and Lydia have visited other communities. That is something that we're probably going to do more of to kind of be the guidance of how it should look if you're doing a voluntary merge. So training will be there, yes, but we might be able to offer some assistance as far as could we come out to a meeting in your part of the state and talk to you, or virtual land, or depending on where it's at, and help you guys get through this as 2 townships, 3 townships, whatever it may be, information to give to your board and try to prepare you to do it successfully. So it's going to build into itself where we're not going to leave anybody without information on how to proceed if that's the route they want to go. Because I do think it's a good thing that this is in there for townships to make a decision under their own will rather than the bills, the scorecard method. So as we get more clarification and we solidify this thing, yes, ITA will be supportive of providing education and support on these mergers across the state.
Hey, Drew.
Yeah.
When we merged, we kept notes on everything, and the other 2 that merged that went into effect this year, they used that information, and our Johnson County, at the county level, anything that changed with the merger, they've kept detailed notes. So we've kind of got the roadmap laid out. So we're here to help. Yes, absolutely.
And another thing, once we get to this point of this bill being enrolled, it would be, if you don't have county trustee meetings, it might be a good time to try to call your, if you got a couple of you that meet, try to get all your townships, because it's going to affect you one way or another. If we got a trustee that doesn't show up for those county trustee meetings, it's going to be hard. Like, they're going to have to do something at some point. Like, I've got one in my own county where we tried to invite this township and they never show up. Could they be impacted? You would want to, at least let them know that there's been a law change, and this is what it's going to look like going forward. So if you just kind of a best practice, if you're not doing county trustee meetings where it's just discussing what's going on, the new laws or whatever it may be, it would be good in the next, 6 months to start kind of to meet occasionally, not every week, not every month, but just say like, hey, like last year we had the CIP and the roads fund bill, like call your township trustees, because we don't have everybody in the state of Indiana in our membership. I wish we did. But it's nothing wrong with sharing information that affects us all, regardless if you're a member of the association or not.
All right, this might be a question for Dan. We've got multiple people who have asked online, and we also got this on Facebook and some emails earlier this week in terms of defining a municipality, city versus town, incorporated versus unincorporated. Could you help explain what municipality is defined as?
I was just responding to Diana on this and erased it so that I could just talk about it. It would only be incorporated towns and municipalities. Having said that, it wouldn't matter probably anyway, because I find it very unlikely that an unincorporated town would make up 80% of a township's borders. So you probably wouldn't even fall into that category anyway.
Yeah, because I've seen a couple people ask if, or not a couple people, somebody had brought a scenario where the township was bigger than the town. Does that still meet the 51%? If the town was so small that it fit inside of the whole township, I think it's the reverse. The township has to be 80% of its boundaries within the corporation or the incorporated city. That's the key part of it. If the township's bigger than the town, then I don't think there's any mechanism to say that you have to merge with the small town. But yes, town, and people have asked that, does towns, are they included in municipalities? As long as they're incorporated, yes.
I'm reading back through, there are a number of people who are asking if the point system can be changed or evolved. I'm assuming we're too late to
As
make
in,
any
like,
further
now,
changes.
like, could they come back in the future and change the point system? Obviously, that's very well a possibility once it's in the enrolled act. We would think if there's something that we've missed in this scorecard, you know, if there's something that we think that needs to be added, obviously we could come back in future legislation and offer it. We tried to vet this over a year process of what we were trying to look as far as an effective township. I get it. There's not every question on there, but we're really trying to look at a couple, commonalities. And we've, even in these legislative briefings, we talked about, what about cemeteries and what about parks and what about, things that we can't necessarily measure that well. But I know we all, a lot of us do, and we try to keep it basic as far as the services, whether it's what are the two main things that townships do? Fire protection and assistance. Now, there's a lot more things that townships do that are, not those things, but not every township does. Some townships have a lot of cemeteries, some townships have none. Some townships have parks, a lot of townships that don't. So it's hard for us to measure those things and say, does that make you inefficient or efficient? That's hard to argue, but to do it on a large scale, everybody's has the ability to do fire, whether it's contract or self, having your own department. Everybody has the ability to do township assistance. There's other things are very varied depending on your location and the setup of the township already. So you might have a park, but not everybody really has the opportunity to have a park either. So can't scale those things. Cemetery the same way. You may not have any in your township at all, and then your neighbor has 12 of them. So those things are different, or different scales, where township assistance and fire are both, we are required to provide those things in every single township in Indiana. Now, we may not have to provide the fire because we contracted out or mostly incorporated, but if you have say you have a township that's in that 80-51, well, we still have unincorporated areas. It's still required by law for us to provide fire protection to unincorporated areas. So we tried to keep those things and two things that were commonalities in all townships in Indiana, and not add a list so big that, I don't have a park, so I'm going to get a point for this, or I don't have a cemetery, so I'm going to get a point for this. So I think, yes, could they come back and change, add points to the scorecard in the future? Yes, they very well could. But we're hoping that this is a start for something that, one, it's a monumental bill for local government reform. It's not easy for townships to come to the table and say, we know that we've been, picked on and finger pointed at for the last 30 to 40 years, that we know that change is going to have to come. We tried to talk about merging as an association for the last 5 to 10 years and say, hey, it's going to come. Do we want to have a voice in it, or do we want to be told what the outcome is going to be? And with the scorecard, that essentially it's like the CIP from last year. The roads fund bill, we tried to fight to get it out. It just didn't seem like it was going to come out. So we asked as an association for a CIP to protect that money, because we knew that there was townships out there saving money for fire departments or, building repairs or whatever it may be. And it should be able to save money rather than just go take out debt or, raise your tax levies. So the scorecard is ultimately the ITA's handprint and the township's handprint to say, okay, let's look at it. So what we did last year in January, when we were told by the legislators to either you figure it out or we'll do it. So we said, okay, let's go through our membership and try to ask these questions of what could we scale on, whether it's efficiency, ability, funding ability, compliance, all those things. And we try to look at them. And we've done that all through the year 2025. So we essentially started mid-January of 2025 all the way till December of this year. And we felt comfortable taking that and hopefully not too much changes. And I still think it is the core piece of this bill that we have that there to say, okay, we've got to look in the mirror sometimes and say we're not as effective. There's points that they're making that are accurate, and there's points they're making that aren't. A lot of people think that townships are, in general, aren't necessary. We know that's not true. Are some townships built to succeed and some built to fail? Very, very likely. We're not trying to sit here and say that pick these people and not pick those people, but we want to get to a level where we say they stop pointing the finger at us. We've tried to clean up and make it more efficient as a form of local government, because you'll get the horse and buggy comparisons, all the antiquated comments about township government, and we can't just keep ignoring it and hope to go into another session and play defense. And that was ultimately the idea of, obviously we didn't know the number of the bill, Senate Bill 270, but this township efficiency scoreboard.
Drew, just building on that, and this might be a good one for Dan. There's been a lot of confusion both in the questions that we got here and emails that we got earlier that the 80/50 language is very early in the bill, and people are not realizing that you have to have the 4 points for that to be enacted. Could you just go back through that, because there's a lot of people who are confused?
Yeah, the order of legislation, Indiana Code, doesn't make any difference. It has to do with the definitions contained within the 80/50 piece that came over from 1315, and the definitions contained within what is originally 270. And in 1315, it lists what a designated township is. In a designated township, it says in that language that it is defined as a township that meets the requirements of the definition in what was 270 before. And if you go look at that definition, it says any township that has 4 or more points. So in order to be a designated township under the 8051 piece and potentially have to merge with the municipality, you have to first have 4 points.
So that was a big confusion, and a lot of questions that I received with phone calls. And I asked Dan about that several times just for clarification. And I went back and read the bill, and it's all about what it says is a designated township, and it refers to the IC code that it ties into the section that talks about the scorecard. So yes, it is on top of the bill as far as where it was inserted, but it does not mean that's where the bill starts, if that makes sense. It's not the opening page of the book. It's just a section that they put in there. Designated township has to be scored the 4 points or more to be designated that to be eligible for the 8051 rule.
Because all bills are in statutory order, right? And so earlier statutes will always come before the higher numbered ones.
I don't understand this question. So Rick Long, you might need to come on in. Do we still have to file a resolution by June 31st as to who will be our county executor over the township? Rick, you may need to add to that, because I don't think any of us are sure what you're referring to. And I know I grouped several questions together, and I do think we've answered all of them. If I've missed anyone, please put your hand up or come on. And
Rick wants to ask this question. He doesn't have to retype it. If he wants to unmute, you can. That way we can understand it a little bit better.
Hopefully we got to everyone's. And sorry, I did merge several questions into one. So, Chris Weisner, go ahead and ask your question. You can unmute.
Okay, my question, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, so my question is, if I would absorb a smaller township, does that township keep its own name, or is that considered Columbus Township as well?
You could rename it. I think it would be part of, and maybe Lydia can speak to that. The renaming, do you have to rename Lydia, or could you keep it as Columbus Township, but just a different?
I would advise against just naming it the one township, because after we merged, the union did not like losing their name. So I would combine them. I know the one here in Johnson County that was Hensley and Nineveh, they did Southern Township or Southern Johnson Township. Yeah, I would try to keep both the names, and then that way there's no identity loss, even though you are one unit.
And
And
also,
then do they keep their previous tax rate, or does that fall under my tax rate?
so I can answer that one. Well, sort of, but regarding the first question, keep in mind that the township itself will still technically exist because other things utilize township boundaries, like elections, for instance. And precincts and all those types of things. So the township boundaries will still exist. It will just all be governed by another body. With regard to the tax rates, some will go up, some will go down. It really is very fact specific to the townships that will be merging. For instance, if you have two townships that merge, one is more urban, one is more rural. The urban one probably has a higher tax rate than the rural one. When you merge together, you will essentially get a new max levy. And that max levy will be based on any of what your budget is anticipated to be, and how you any efficiencies that you might find, because you'll have theoretically less overhead. You may be providing less services, but in some cases you might be providing more services, right? So, because if you have 10 cemeteries between the two townships, you're still going to be servicing 10 cemeteries. And so it all depends on what that new max levy is. And then there will be a one rate for the combined township.
Somebody asked if you file your annual report late. Actually, I think they changed the language from late to actually, did you fail to file? So, correct, Dan, didn't they clarify that language? For the
We talked about it. I can't remember if it made it in here or not.
I think maybe they changed it to away from late to actually, did you fail to file it, which typically is rare, because if you don't file on time, they subpoena you and they give you a chance to file it. I find it rare if they did change that language, most people would.
Just to reiterate, we are still working on the self-score tool. This is just a draft. We have to go through the legal review. We have to double check with DLGF, and just make sure that we've got all of the wording correct. And we need to do some test runs. This was created yesterday. So do give us a little time to make sure it's correct before we put it up on the ITA website. Rick Long says, I talked to another township trustee here in Vigo County. She said they already had their board resolution to appoint the county commissioners, their executive point to oversee their township. I remember seeing something in writing to this effect, had to be done by the end of June 2026.
Not aware of anything that would legally give the county.
Jeff responded, I think they misread House Bill 1315.
Oh,
I'm not sure.
I don't know. I mean, there's no current law that would allow the county commissioners to assume the duties of the township trustee. There was discussion with 1315, but if the commissioners are trying to do that, or if it's been kind of proposed, I don't think that's legal.
Yeah, and we specifically asked that the county piece be stripped out of what came over from 1315, because it used to be either the municipality or the county, for a few reasons. Number one, you could have a township in northwest of the county, and the county seat is in the southeast. And how do you provide, the services the townships currently provide at that distance? So that was one of the issues. And the other issue is, I'm not sure how excited the county was to take over those services in the first place.
So they did clarify some of the language in the annual report one and the monthly engagements. It says 1 point, and this is looking through the bill. So we can send out the bill, but like Dan said, it's a long list of things. It says question 3, 1 point for each year that a township government did not file an annual finance report with the state board of accounts. That's not really a timely question. That's, did you file your annual report? So that list should be very small of township government entities, because like I said, they'll subpoena you. And I guess will it be the people that get subpoenaed? Will that be the ones that get the point for it, or is it the people that just absolutely don't turn it in after that? Because once the state calls you, and usually people turn their annual reports in at that point. And then for I think it was the question about the monthly engagements, it says 1 point for each year a township government did not file all required monthly upload reports as required by the director of the state board of accounts in 24-25. It doesn't mention timely. So that's a language interpretation. So I would assume as that, I'm not an attorney like Mr. Shackle is, could late be accepted if you still turn them in, but not on,
So,
timely manner.
State Board of Accounts will
Take
do
care.
their interpretation, send that over to DLGF. If you feel that you were improperly given a point based on the language of the statute, I encourage you to appeal with DLGF and provide the evidence that you think is necessary to change that point, and then DLGF will issue a final determination.
There was a question about merging across county lines. Dan, do you want to take that?
What are we talking about here? I had trouble here.
They're asking if you've got one township in one county and another township in another county, can they merge?
No, the mergers have to happen within the same county.
I don't think the current merger statute or the Modernization Act, anything, it all has to be local to your county.
Phone 1 disconnected.
No, I thought someone was talking. I think it all has to be within your county. I don't think even any current laws you could do something across the county boundary for tax purposes, especially.
So the next question is, how will it be determined if the townships that are neighboring borders all score under 4 or have the same score and none of them want to merge? Does that go to the county commissioners to figure out, Dan?
So if they're all under 4, they don't have to merge anyway. But there could be a scenario where when you meet, all of the trustees have their meeting with the county commissioners, and ultimately you'll decide how it, what it should look like in terms of there may be other townships that are required to merge, and you might be contiguous to one of those townships. You might be asked to be the receiving township and merge with another one because they have to merge. That's a possibility.
The next question is, can the DLGF notify townships of their points as they calculate them instead of waiting until December 31st to notify everyone at the same time?
Can they? Yes. Will they do that? I find it very, very unlikely.
I think the others were already answered in terms of, I think we are caught up.
And like I said, as this, once this bill gets to the process and actually becomes enrolled act, then we can sit and try to figure out we don't want to guess on anybody's points and say, we think you're going to have to merge. We don't want to be in that, because we won't have the DLGF until they release that. We won't have anything official. Once we get the self-scoring tool out there, this is just a tool for you to kind of try to brainstorm in your mind what you think the next 3 to 4 years are going to look like. And yes, some of us are going to get a point. That does not mean you're going to be 4 points total. So try to do the self-score, the self-score tool once we get it up. If you have questions like, hey, I'm not sure if I got this and I don't really know where to find this information. If we can help you, we'll try. There may be some things that we're just not 100% sure about. Like I said, I can find if you filed your AFR. I can find if you did township assistance. The uniqueness of fire is going to make it very difficult for us to give you an opinion on if I have the station, the equipment, but I don't have the department. Does that count? We're really going to have to get some more clarification on that. And the DLGF is going to have that clarification at some point. But we won't be able to access that clearly. I don't want to put you, maybe that's the one that determines whether or not you're a 3 or a 4. And we would hate as an association to say, well, put no, because I think, we think that is actively, or yes, we think you are managing the township or fire department or EMS. But the other ones, like we could help you because they're most of the reports you can get in Gateway. The ballot question, we might be able to help. Might have to pull some information from some other sites. But some of the things we just aren't going to be able to give you an accurate answer, and we don't want that to be the tipping scale for you, where it's like, well, the association told me I was a 3, but the LGF told me it was 4. Well, we don't have anything official. They're not running it by us first. They're going to run it through the State Department and then get it to the townships.
There have been several questions about the amendments that made changes from or to and. Do we want to summarize that one more time just because there's been multiple questions on that?
Yeah, so I think question, like township assistance question, it says 2 points if it did not provide township assistance in calendar year 23 and 24. Dan, does that mean you can have assistance in 23 and not 24? You have to have assistance in both years to get the 2, or no assistance in both years to get to.
Going back up to it.
It's on page 17.
In number 1, with regard to township assistance, it would be both together.
So you would have had to not do assistance in either of those years to get the 2. So
That's right.
that one. So if you're thinking about doing the self-analysis, say I did 0 in 23 and I did 500 to 1,000 in 24, you wouldn't get the point there, right, Dan? If that's how I'm understanding it correct.
Yes.
But if you did 0 in 23 and 0 again in 24, you're going to get 2 points there.
That's right.
Michael Shively wrote, huge thanks to Lydia for returning his call. He says, as it is written now, the language is not crystal clear if the 8051 portion of Senate Bill 270 would dissolve Anderson Township of Madison County. This would cause some serious issues. And then he goes through and lists on how we weren't showing Anderson Township as one that would potentially have 4 points, did we?
I just looked at them as you were reading this, and they are currently being shown as Anderson and Madison is shown as having a minimum of 1 point, maximum of 3. So right now, the 2 that I think that Drew has repeatedly stated is we don't know the monthly engagement piece, only the local units would know that one. And right now we are showing just a score of 1, and the only place where they would get a point would be on the fire question.
I think the question is that people are still worried that the 8051 has nothing to do with the scorecard. And I think that's where we're going to get a lot of questions from our townships that are mostly incorporated, that they are worried that the 8051 is going to circumvent any scorecard method. And I've talked to Dan. My township was in a similar target of House Bill 1315. We wouldn't support it if we didn't think there was a protection from the scorecard. If it was just put this in here and we split it kind of like House Bill 1315 was, where some got the scorecard and some got geography, our position wouldn't be the same. If you score 4 or more, then that's a different conversation. But we don't feel, from what we can capture and what we can see through limited scope data, that we would have any townships that this 8051 is going to impact. And we don't have any that score for. If there is, I don't think there is. I think that would be off the table.
So far, I've only found one township, and it is a small township in a small incorporated town that are fully contiguous.
But I think we addressed that. I think the township has to be 80% incorporated in the city.
Yes.
So
but it's only been one, and it's a township of less than 2,000 population that is fully overlapping with their town. Like they share the same boundaries, and so the township is scoring 4 or more points, and so that's the only one I've been able to find statewide so far.
So Mike, I know you called me too, and I've tried to call you back. I just think I'm playing phone tag with you at your office. So if somebody's got, thinks they're in that 8051 and wants to have a conversation with me, please give me a call or email me, and I'll give you my cell phone number. We can have a chat. Trust me, I would be just as uneasy about it as you were, or several others are. And I've asked Dan. I probably got on his nerves over the last 3 days of like, hey, I need to make sure that we have this. And then just reading back through it, it's all about what the references are. It's not about the order of the bill as far as how it's stacked on top of each other. It's about where it references designated township. And the only place in the whole bill where it gives a definition of a designated township is in the scorecard. And even in the 8051, it references earlier in this chapter to the scorecard through IC code.
Are you able to share what township you thought might be part of it?
Our analysis so far, if it's just Union Township and Tippecanoe County.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Union Township and Tippecanoe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering how it affects me, and maybe Drew, I can talk to you because we're rather small. I'm Pine Township, Porter County, and we're 2,000, residents, and we're probably the smallest one in Porter County. So I'm just wondering how we may be affected by it.
Yeah, and that's why, OnHealth does have some data, but it's not official data, and that's why he's done this on his own. If you want to reach out to him, you can, but it's not a position from the ITA to say this is what's going to happen to everybody. That's why we want to kind of do the self score so that we can kind of fill it in and get an idea. And then if you're like, I'm at a 3 and I'm not sure if I click this, I'm going to be a 4, like I'm not sure of the answer, then let's have a conversation because it may not look like what you think it is. There may be somebody think I'm a 4 and they may be a 1. So, reach out to us. Obviously, we're going to keep working on this. We're going to try to get the scorecard, the self-score tool on the member center. So it won't be something that if you're not logged in, you won't be able to find it. That's going to be key to it. So it's going to be for our members, not necessarily for every township because it's something that we've worked on or, we had somebody work on very rapidly, but we think it'll be a beneficial tool to kind of with, getting that planning move.
Okay. So are you saying I should talk with someone else or you, Drew?
No, you can give me an email. Shoot me an email.
Okay.
I was just saying if you want to ask him questions about his data, then you'll have to go to him.
Okay, I believe we have covered all of the questions. Oh, I'm sorry. I did miss one. A board vacancy point, is that only 2022 election? It was on board vacancy, and they're asking if that's only the 2022 election.
2018 or 2022.
But both of them. So they added that question that used to be question 8 was split into 2. So now it says a maximum of 1 point if a township did not have a candidate on the election ballot for the offices of the township board in either 2018 or 22. And then B, on July 1st, 2026, there was at least one vacancy on the township board that has been vacant for at least 30 calendar days. However, a point may be not assigned to a township under Clause A if the township did not have a candidate on the ballot in those 2 years, but under IC 3-13-10 or 3-13-11, whichever is applicable before the date of the first meeting that is required under Indiana Code 1 to go through it in the year following the general election. So in 18, if you had your county chair or county party put in, filled those vacancies before the first required meeting of that year in 18 and 22, if you had it back in both election cycles, you would not get a point for that. For both, but trustee and board are now separate. It's not one combined question. It's two separate questions. So it has the same rules for both of them. So if you had vacancies in the ballot in both years for the trustee, but they had a caucused in trustee for the first initial meeting required by law, you do not get a point for that. Same for the board. They added that in there. It was an amendment from House Bill 1315. It was kind of a joint amendment, one that we knew was coming. It just hadn't got to that point. We can see about it. I just think probably the wording of that question is very long, that he just tried to simplify it.
There's a question of what if caucus to fill the position for the board had to be scheduled after the required meeting? So assuming that falls back to the appeal process.
I mean, if there was no control, if the local party didn't do that, but they're supposed to do it within a reasonable. I think that's going to be one that has to go to the scorecard, because I don't know if they look at that as subjective or objective.
And that data will come over from the Secretary of State's election division.
That is all the questions we've got. So we are recording the session. We will put it up on the ITA website. And as soon as we've got the scorecard ready, we'll put that up.
Hey, Corey, go ahead, raise your hand. Hey, you had your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, not really a question, but I guess more of a kind of a generalized comment. I completely understand this is all for the quote unquote benefit of the taxpayer, simplifying government, yada, yada, all the things we've talked about. But has anybody made a statement to the legislatures that how much taxpayer money how this is actually going to adversely affect the taxpayer over the course of the next 2, 3, 4 years while this, because right now, the DLGF is, kind of tapped out already. We're getting ready to go into budget season and all this certification and everything. Now you're going to add a vast majority of, things on their plate. So I see extra people hired. I see more money being spent. So, just kind of a point there
I mean, with any
I get what they're doing, but
elimination or consolidation, it's going to cause an extra workload. You could then balance it with the same side to say, well, reduction of units have to, in the long run, it's reducing, the workload on the DLGF by 300 units or whatever the case might be, or the State Board of Accounts, in a 10, 15-year window. You'd have to get a real cost analysis. There's going to be a cost. If you eliminated all townships, somebody's going to have to figure out how the impact is going to be in servicing all that maneuvering, I guess. There's really no way to do anything.
Yeah.
You can claim savings, but everything always has a cost.
Yeah.
Drew, we have 2 new area reps on the call.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to introduce them?
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about it, but Corey, who wanted to just offer that question or comment about it's going to cost us a lot of money, is our new Southeast director from Saluda Township in Jefferson County. Is it Jefferson County? Jefferson County. You're not in Jeffersonville. He's new to the board. We just was appointed for the vacancy there. And then Thomas Lopez is from Center Township in Hancock County. He is our central area director. So our donut hole counties, I believe, and a little bit few outside of those. I don't know, Thomas would be on wave and say hi. So if you typically, if we have questions, those are your guys' point contacts to kind of be somebody in your area. Obviously, like somebody asked, is ITA going to provide training and information? And our area directors are probably going to be a big part of this information and communication wave after all this is said and done, helping us, obviously from Fishers, we're not expecting everybody to get their information from the Fishers, but they will be our point people in their portions of the state. So if you haven't met them and they're in your area, they'll probably be reaching out to you. If you want to reach out to them, that's fine. You can ask them questions. And I was explaining to Corey, he's like, well, what do I need to do? I said, well, be our point person If it's something you can answer it. If you need, run it up the chain, we'll help you out. So glad to have both Corey and Thomas on board.
And if anybody's not certain who their area director is, if you go to the ITA website and click contact us, you will see pictures and contact information for all of the area reps.
And we should have one more legislative briefing. I know you guys are probably tired of seeing me every Friday talking to you. I don't quite like to hear my own voice, so I'm sure nobody else does. But we will guaranteed at least have one more next Friday. We hope that we know. Maybe we'll have one more depending on the process of it going to the governor's desk if it gets to that point. But we're getting towards that. The end here. It's a short session. It seemed like a really long session, mainly because we've had two really prominent township bills out there, and hoping that, the hope is in the future legislative or general assemblies, maybe we're not on defense mode so much and we're working on some real positive things for townships and communities rather than how can we, restructure everything and see what works best. So we'll plan to be back here next Friday at 10. Obviously, all the recordings are uploaded. Sometimes it's very quickly. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. We try to get them on the member center so people aren't able to join us. But we've been at least 150 to 190 people each Friday morning trying to figure out all that. So we appreciate you taking the time to join us.
And we hope everyone will sign up for the township assistance training that is coming on April 22nd. The link is on the website, on the ITA website, and it is also in the email newsletter that you should be getting on a regular basis. The next newsletter will come out early March, and there will be information linking it. Also, if you don't have the conference on your schedule, October 7th through the 9th. We had some questions about the date on that. So please mark your calendar, and you will find those on the website as well.
See you guys. Have a good weekend.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you for watching this legislative update, brought to you by the Indiana Township Association.